Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. So to be determined as far as the branding, because when you don't have the national network, just like if and when a denomination, if all the denominations left the Council of Churches at once, for example, which is not going to happen, but then you would come into question of what the role of the council is. So we're definitely doing that discernment around interfaith power and light. And having worn that hat for almost 15 years, I feel as though it's an exciting new chapter in my life. And the way in which I'm going to go through the bigger tent, as it were, relative to the eco-justice connection, which actually was the program at the Council of Churches prior to Interfaith Power and Light being launched in California. And we took on that brand to be part of the national network. And now we're coming back home to our original programming name of the Eco-Justice Connection. And what I love about that, I'll just go forward here. So, yes. So as of right now, I have to wear 3 logos. I'm hoping to maybe get it down to 2, and as my executive director, Reverend Dr. Jennifer Copeland says, everything we do, we lead with the council. So the Eco-Justice Connection is, during the pandemic, it actually was that we recognized that IPL was really well known for a particular kind of narrow initiative around climate justice and environmental justice relative to the play on the concept of the power and light within us and our relationship to power and light. So this is a perfect example of a congregation that has taken that into action, from energy efficiency, implementation, what you're doing, even composting, that is a part of the drawdown goals relative to carbon emissions. So being able to embrace that and not try to fit everything under an energy conversation has been really exciting for me. And, for most congregations, unless they already have a really active green team, starting with energy can be very esoteric and really complicated and not that exciting. And there's not that many. I've Googled over and over and over for like a sexy image of energy efficiency. If you find one, please send it to me. But food justice and how we come around the table together in community is really what this is about. So I like to call what we do the What I Love campaign. What is it that you love and what are you willing to do to protect it? And if we can begin identifying that, there's really nothing literally and figuratively under the sun that we can't connect around. So eco-justice also reminds us of our relationship to care for God's creation and ourself as part of that creation and our relationship to the natural world from an ecological perspective, but then also how our societies have been developed globally around an economic system. So that eco is really diverse in the way that we can talk about the issues. So here we are today, educate, inspire, and mobilize. That's our, if you think about the recycling symbol that we're all familiar with the arrows, in order to be mobilized, you have to be educated and certainly inspired, and then come back around to that. So I'm constantly educating myself, and in order to be inspired to mobilize, otherwise sometimes I feel like I'm done. But this presentation tonight is truly like, I believe that I am placed on this earth to do this work and have found my ministry. And I'm very excited that I've been recruited. So pray for me this spring as I finish my application. I've been recruited by Union Theological Seminary to do a doctoral of ministry around this work. So I'm applying. I haven't applied to college since my MDiv over 20 years ago. So, yeah, it'll be good. But I hope you find this of interest. And as we journey together through this work, there'll be a lot more to come, I hope. So the Eco-Justice Connection has its own programmatic web link, I should say, on the North Carolina Council's page, and it'll bring you to a whole website within a website. So I wanted to show you here how these 6 bubbles how we're expanding our work beyond just the energy democracy work, and CIPL fits in under that. And we'll continue to do so because, as I mentioned to Peggy, we have a volunteer-led energy working group. These are the same folks that have been, and they've evolved and some have come and gone, but we've been providing energy audits for no cost to congregations since 2005. We've done hundreds and hundreds of them, and almost every solar system that I'm aware of was connected in some form and fashion to original education from our volunteers. So it's really churches talking to churches about their experiences. And now that we've gotten into, advocating, again, the mobilization is once you've gotten the solar on the roof, how are you telling your story about it? Because you didn't just do it to save money. You did, of course, but, as Jennifer, my executive director, likes to say, Jesus didn't get crucified for praying too hard, right? I mean, you have to advocate for what it is, and, overturning the tables of money is a huge part of that. And so I have worked very closely with the utilities for my entire career, and continually remind, and I would love to come back to the Earth team and talk more. I'm not going to get into it today, but there's a lot of things moving in the legislature. Last week, a terrible bill, Senate Bill 261 passed. It was introduced on a Monday night and went through the Senate, through the committees by noon on Tuesday. This is a complete power grab to remove the carbon reduction goals for 2030 in the carbon plan. So it's
they've got all of those.
they're just,
That sounds like, dude.
yes, they got what they wanted, and now they're easily
without
undoing it. So, so there's a lot there, and how a congregation like yours with solar and renewable energy can speak to the issue from a moral imperative perspective is the most powerful voice, especially when meeting, and educating, and inspiring, and then mobilizing people to take a hard vote against the largest monopolized utility in the world. So there's a lot there. So I'm not changing my own screen, so I know where I am. So that's energy democracy, faithful advocacy, that's all wrapped up in all the issues. Environmental justice. We, unlike a lot of organizations, are not removing our DEI language. And in fact, if you go to the about section, and we don't have to do that now, I would love for you all to look at our JEDI statement. It's been interesting in the justice space that even DEI, the naming of that has been really truthfully designed in a way where white dominant culture is attempting to diversify their own spaces, but not willing to get out of their own comfort zone in order to do so. And so the leaders of color and Indigenous leaders that we've been working with in the EJ space definitely made it very clear in our messaging as a movement that you had to put justice first. And if you put justice first and make that your priority, then you will begin to be working towards equity, and then diversity will happen if you are all working on justice and equity. Diversity happens inherently in ecosystems, if that's what you're working on, and then you will reach inclusivity. So we also love it because we all want to strive to be Jedis, right? I mean, that is what we're working towards, and it's really hard work, and you have to constantly be working at it. So we have a wonderful JEDI statement that's front and center to the work that we do with the Eco Justice Connection. And then I'm going to come back to local to global solidarity, climate and health. What we've learned, and certainly in this time, political climate, and my dear friend, Reverend Leo Woodbury, who I'll tell you about an event at the end that's happening at Duke University next week. He'll be one of the people on a plenary keynote, a fireside chat at the Nicholas Institute for the Heat Innovation Hub. And so he holds an annual conference in Florida, South Carolina every year called Creating a Climate for Change, and reminds us to remember that there's all sorts of climates. There's the meteorological climate, the atmospheric climate, and then there's the political climate, there's the economic climate, there's the social climate. And so we can talk about climate in those ways that is more accessible and inclusive. But also what we're really talking about relative to humanity and the climate crisis that we're in is that it is a global health issue. And from the health and wellness of all species, quite frankly, and our responsibility as humans to address it as such. So that was really fascinating, having done climate action work for so long, to live into the pandemic and be thinking about the kinds of things that are on the precipice at any moment that can and will happen. And there is some really interesting data around why COVID-19 in particular traveled in the way that it did relative to actually climate change. So that's a whole nother story. But we have at the Council of Churches, our largest program that's predominantly funded by the Duke Endowment is called Partners in Health and Wholeness. And right now almost their entire focus is on mental health and wellness. So we're doing faith and health summits all over the state right now. And I'm able to bring this work into that space as well. So making that climate and health connection. And then resiliency and restoration. If you haven't heard the word resiliency, or you haven't not talking about it or reading about it or seeing, like, that is the buzzword. So it's a challenge because, as probably everyone in this room, other than maybe Tavis, the word sustainability was drilled into us during the 90s and early 2000s. And from a justice perspective, there was a lot of conversation around how our ability to sustain, which is what is the root force of the concept of sustainability, was really designed for a particular economic demographic. The green building movement, was about this and that, and so you don't see that word very often anymore, if you haven't noticed. But resiliency has come in fast and furious, and it's both a positive because our ability to be resilient in times of great challenge is really important. And then we know that the communities that are already struggling first and worst, all day long, every day, are not comfortable with the word resiliency. So I would challenge you to be aware of where you're having that conversation, and being open to listening of why. If you're already stretched, they use the image of the rubber band, if you're already stretched to capacity every single day, and then you're being told that you have to learn how to be resilient, actually our communities that are challenged the most by our current society are the most resilient communities in the world. And so directly back to the climate crisis, it's the frontline communities that are serving as examples of resiliency. And when we look to Indigenous wisdom and knowledge, and how when I'm in some meetings talking about how we're going to, fight this current regime, Indigenous leaders will remind us that they've been fighting the U.S. government for 400 years. This isn't new. So listening, learning. So we use the language of resiliency and restoration because that's actually where reparations needs to take place as well. So local to global solidarity, I really could just have that be like the bubble, and then have these be the bubbles within the bubbles. But that's what we're going to talk about more in depth tonight. And I'm going to be sensitive to time because I do want to have time for conversation. So here is our Jedi statement. You can read that on our website, but it's much longer. These are the high level goals of it. And, you'll see the words that stand out: faith and spirituality, justice, hope, courage, love. So these are our values for the program. Okay, so here we are on the local to the global page. Bye, no problem. Watch the recording. So we have some resources partners, and I'm just gonna go ahead. Okay, so climate change. When you think about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they're using the word sustainable there, our ability to sustain the goals that we have. Climate change is one of these, climate action, number 13.
Mhm.
So there's all these other goals that the United Nations is working on. And I want to acknowledge that this is the 80th anniversary, 2025, of the United Nations. This is a really significant historical moment. Also at a time where the United Nations is like holding together by toothpick. I mean, it's not in good form. And this past year in 2024 at the UN convention in New York City, they did an analysis of where we're at in meeting the goals around these 17 principles, and we have not met any of the goals. So I work a lot with youth leaders, and they have really put forth to the United Nations Secretariat the question of when are we going to stop making goals that we have no intention of being successful at, that this isn't helpful. And so the story that I'm going to go down right now relative to what's happening in the UN climate negotiations is very similar, that we are not meeting the goals that were established by the whole world together. So it's always good. I have a poster of this in my office, and I like to remind myself, how am I touching on each of these? It would be a different workshop type of space, you know, for you all as a congregation to think about where your ministries do or do not intersect on some of these, and how you can actually really create a community, because obviously, you know, some of your members of this congregation are interested in the green team, but it doesn't mean they might be passionate about something else, and how you have that collective conversation, I think is really interesting, because you have to do it all, right? So, so I am just going to give you the shortest introduction to the UN climate change process possible, which is, and the UNFCCC. So that's the, you might, if you're reading about it or you hear about the COPs and the meetings that happen, I'm going to go into that, but it's the United Nations Framework Commission on Climate Change is that crazy acronym. Okay, so gotta do it here. Okay, so here is a historical milestone development of the UN climate regime, using that language. And if you look back, the UNFCCC, which is the arm specifically for the climate change work of the United Nations, was founded in 1992. So not that long ago. I mean, I was alive and out of college, and I mean, not out of college, out of high school. I graduated in 1990. So I wasn't following what was happening with the United Nations at that time, but obviously something very significant. And when they mention, this comes from World Resources Institute, the integration of science into the political process is what founded the birth of the convention. And so you can kind of go through, you might remember kind of hearing about the Kyoto Protocol, and did we really, I mean, who was educating regular people about this stuff? But it was kind of in the news. So that was COP stands, it's a terrible acronym, the worst acronym ever, stands for the Committee of Parties, which are the member bodies of the United Nations that come together to meet as part of the Framework Convention on Climate Change. So countries started coming together to have these conferences, and Kyoto was the first time that mitigation targets and timetables for developed countries was established. And so then you can kind of go through that. And Marrakesh, that, you know, there was a meeting there in 2001, the Accords and the Bali Action Plan in Copenhagen and first commitment. And I can give you like ad nauseum information about this, but I want to get it up to where we are today. So I want to highlight at COP19, which was in 2013, that acronym of NDC stands for Nationally Determined Contribution. So what they recognize is that as all of the countries from around the world have been coming together to have a conversation, they actually needed to get down into the work and say, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? We can talk about the problem globally, but it's really important that we like put some pledges on the table, and that led us 2 years later to the Paris Agreement. So that happened very quickly once they started realizing, oh, you're going to make a pledge, you're going to make a pledge, and probably not surprisingly at all, countries are very competitive with each other. So that happened in 2015. And from a faith perspective, I want to throw something on here that's not on this graph, is that Pope Francis released his encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si, the year of the Paris Agreement. That is not a coincidence. So Pope Francis, as a scientist himself, has been very interested in following this whole process his entire career, and recognizing the issues and impacts of global climate change. And then in the role when he came into becoming Pope, knew that he would need to say something. And I had learned, because as a not a Catholic, any former Catholics in this room? That encyclicals are like this, a pope can write them at any time when they feel called to do so. It truly is a channeling message from God to the people of the Catholic Church. Pope Francis knew that he would write to the 1.6 billion Catholics with a message, but he also knew that he was writing it for all of humanity. So he actually released that prior to the Paris Agreement, because he had been following what was going to happen and what the goals of what the goal was to happen in Paris. They name these things after where the meetings happened, by the way. So so they had been, in Copenhagen in 2009, leading up. The Pope is mulling over what it is that, what do you say? I mean, that's a big job, right? You have to write a sermon, but and so it was at the end of May of 2015 that he released Laudato Si. I personally think it's one of the greatest things that has ever been written by a human being. It's easy to read and needs to be revisited. And then he came, if you'll recall, and spoke to the United States Congress, and a pope had not done it, and addressed Congress and I almost said something, I'm not going to say it. Tom Tillis happens to be Catholic. And when I've met with him multiple times, he has a big picture of the Pope addressing the Congress. And he says that is one of the greatest moments of his life, which I full-heartedly believe. And I'm like, are you listening? Yes, so that all happened leading up to Paris, and it really the pillars of, and I'll get faster because I do want to show this 6-minute video that will explain the overview, and then we can get into dialogue. But the 3 pillars of engagement, it's not just the governments that attend these meetings of all of the sustainable development goals. They have the private sector. So private sector is typically corporations at this point, stakeholders that are majorly involved in the global economy, and they have a lot of power at these meetings, as you can imagine. The governments, which at the UN is referred to as the public sector. I feel like, don't always talk, if we think of the public sector, we think about ourselves and our communities, but in the United Nations framework, the public sector is government, because they are there to represent the people that put them into power. All of us, and what I remind representatives from the private sector and the public sector, every single person is a part of civil society. And so we're actually the largest constituent at these events. And it's a challenge to remind elected officials and people, CEOs and corporations, people that work at corporations, that they also are part of civil society, and that they should actually be involved in our advocacy above and beyond what their personal, interests are relative to the private and public sector. But it was civil society, and particularly young people from around the world, that helped solidify the Paris Agreement with the goals that it has, which it was at the time, and still should be, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. At that time, we were on the trajectory to surpass it, and the goal was to make sure that we didn't get past that, because for many, many reasons, it makes the Earth, less and less habitable. And And unfortunately, last year, 2024 was the first time we actually surpassed it. We did reach 1.6 degrees last year. And we're on a trajectory to 4 degrees, which is just a nightmare. So we are hoping that we will be able to get back to the original goal. And we know that now we're at a place where we have to start drawing carbon down. It's not just about keeping it in the ground and not releasing it. We actually have to get some of that out of there. And our forests have to play a huge part of that, which is why it's so interesting that the next meeting in November of this year, for the first time, because it rotates continents, for the first time, we'll be back in the Southern Hemisphere, in Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest, which if you're seeing some articles about that, that's very controversial because they're having to cut down part of the Amazon rainforest in order to get the amount of people that are going to come to the conference there. So there's a lot. So yes, so I'm going to go through, Paris Agreement. That is the largest international agreement that has ever happened on planet Earth. And it happened in our lifetime 10 years ago. So it's a really exciting time to realize that it could be undue.
Withdrew from during a certain.
So President Trump has announced that we are withdrawing from the Paris Agreement.
Did he do that the first time?
Right. He tried to do it. What's interesting is that there is enough paperwork that it doesn't happen automatically. So technically we cannot actually get out of the Paris Agreement until 2026. But he has said that we will not be sending representation from the government. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because I actually think that's a huge opportunity for the United States to actually show up with the right messaging. Exactly. So here we are. This is the Paris Agreement. This logo on the side is U.S. Climate Action Network. That's the largest network of climate groups in the United States. We're a member of it through the Council of Churches. And there's over 185 organizations, everything from the Big Greens, Sierra Club, NRDC, World Resources Institute, Environmental Defense Fund, to a small group of volunteers. So there's over half of the organizations identify as faith-based, which is very exciting. And so we can talk more about that sometime, or I can send you the list of the members. It's very interesting. So up in the left-hand corner there, you see there is a link. If you could just really quickly open that link, I want to show you. So I was not, in 2015, I knew none of this. Okay. I was like trying to get solar on every church in North Carolina, thinking that that was going to address the climate crisis at scale, right? But also really knowing that it wasn't. And if you can just close that, we're going to come back to that video. There's a little X to the left of the, oh yeah, great. So I didn't know this. And it was in 2019, actually, at a U.S. Climate Action Network conference with all those 185. I was in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'll never forget it. And, you know, when you're in a big network like that, like maybe if you go to your annual meeting for the Presbytery or whatever, you kind of tend to hang with the same people and you go to your same breakouts. And well, in 2019, it was really genius that the executive director of USCAN at the time decided to have the plenary where we're all in the huge blue ballroom. The title was Global Equitable Climate Finance. And I was like, oh, as someone who went to seminary, right? I was like, oh, it's gonna be so boring. Like, I'm not gonna understand it. I'm not into money. I don't talk about money, you know, like it's all about, you know, whatever. And I was riveted and I was hanging on every word. I was like, global equitable climate finance, fair shares. What? Oh my gosh. Like, why have I been doing this work as a minister in this field of climate action? And I don't know any of this. And so when it came time to go into our breakout room, I would always go to building power from the grassroots up. Those are my people. Those are our team, you know, because I'm community focused. But I decided to go down the hallway and it was just a smaller room with a couple of people. I didn't know anybody in the room. And the presentation was called From Bangladesh to Baltimore, Global Equitable Climate Finance. And these like people way smarter than myself, who were able to like be in the depth of what the fair share is. And if you just scroll up, you're going to see that there's going to be a graph here. And they just got into like the weeds around what the US fair share was, and a little bit below, in that it's 14 billion metric tons or 195%. And, you know, and I was like, how can something be more than 100%? And so I just sort of like started, like, I attacked these people and I was like, who are you and where are you having these conversations? And they started talking about the climate negotiations and what was actually being negotiated around who was going to do what to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees and what role developed countries and large emitters had to do. And you can see here, and I'm going to go to the video because the video, what ended up happening, long story longer, I guess, is that I was like, no one is going to understand this. I work with faith communities. We need to understand this. Anybody needs to understand this. It's people of faith. And I'm going to have to work with you now and get a grant to sit with you to translate what it is that you're doing. And I'm going to have to get involved in this. And they were like, come along for the ride. And so I have been named as the community liaison to the U.S. Climate Fair Share Collaborative since 2019. It's been a joy of my life. It's really overwhelming. I love to learn, and it's just been incredible. And what we ended up doing, if you go to the next slide, back to this website has lots, if you go the blog and the backgrounder, and basically these really, really brilliant people from the Stockholm Exchange and the Oakland Institute went to the UN after the Paris Agreement and said, with those nationally determined contributions, every country is going to put forward their pledge. Would you like us to do a fair shares analysis of what the pledges should be relative to what you'll learn? And the UN was like, no. We're barely holding it together right now. You are not going to pit countries against each other. These are voluntarily pledges. And so I was like, okay. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to click on this link, and this is my friend, Reverend Michael Malcolm. He is the founder of the People's Justice Council, and it'll open up a YouTube, and you'll have to open it up, and we can, hopefully the people, that goes back to the website. I should have just kept you there. So when you click play, you can go into full screen. I'll just say that it took us, yep, I'll say afterwards. So if you go to the, yeah, full screen. It's just, this is the script we wrote. Hmm. I don't know. It might be too. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. So you can stop that. So.
Good job.
Thank you. It was really a labor of love. I worked with two other people and an organization that helped with the animation. And believe it or not, a video like that cost $17,000 to make. And no one got paid to do anything. That was just like to make the video. So it's been a really interesting journey. And this video has been shown predominantly in places other than the US, which is really interesting. And we were able to do that because I would like for more people in the US to watch it. But I mentioned the US Climate Action Network. We are the United States node to the Climate Action Network International. These are civil society groups around the world. And it really is the global South that is most active in trying to make sure that global North countries do their fair share, because they're the ones that need the climate finance. So this last part, I'm just going to run through really quick. Yeah, the why, if you go to the, oh, I have the next slide. I have it. So again, historic responsibility, financial capacity, the right thing to do. The right thing to do piece is the ministry part. And so I'm hoping that we can, I hope if I get into the union, I can help develop some more religious materials around this. There is a ton of scripture that fits perfectly with this. So it just, somebody needs to work on it. So hopefully I'm going to get a team to do that. So my first COP I went to was in Egypt, it was a really eye-opening experience. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do over there, and by the time I learned a lot, met a lot of people, and by the time I got to COP 28 in Dubai, we put together the very first faith pavilion that has ever been at a COP. So COP 28 was a momentous moment for faith leaders. And that was a global effort of people of faith that said that there has to be, within civil society, there's lots of different sectors. And so we wanted to have our voices elevated, and we had while the negotiations are happening, there's all of these different pavilions where there's all these different people are speaking all the time. So we had, I can get you the program for what happened there, but really wonderful. And some of you might know Crystal, who is with 7 Directions of Service, an Indigenous woman from the Lumbee tribe here, or not Lumbee, excuse me, Occaneechi tribe, our ancestral land that we're on. She lives in Mebane. She's on the far right. So it's wonderful. And Nellie is based out of Florida. So this is an example of the people sitting at the microphone are actually our climate negotiators. So they have to meet with us while we're over there. And so what we've learned about the role that the United States civil society has been playing is that we've basically been holding our own government accountable in the international space. And it'll be really interesting this year when these people do not come. So we had a meeting earlier this week for folks that are preparing to go to Belém in Brazil, and that we are anointing ourselves as the US delegation. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but it's going to be exciting. And most importantly, we want the rest of the world to see that we're still in, that we still care, that everything we saw in that whole Fair Shares video, our government is not doing, and is actually actively working against that, which is a problem. And so what we did, and gets us to how you found out about this presentation, is that really, really, really brilliant people from around the country. I am not one of the people that wrote this Fair Share NDC, but what I do is I herd cats, right? Like I make sure people, I'm sure you have people in your church that are like, so we wrote a civil society model for our pledge, and this is what we will be bringing to COP 30.
What's COP stand for?
It's the Committee of Parties.
Parties. Okay.
And this will be the 30th meeting. And all of the countries that are in the Paris Agreement are supposed to bring their NDC to this COP. This is the next round. And so we wrote this for the Biden administration and got it in front of them. And that's where my letter comes in. So I don't think we have time to click on these links, but you're all going to receive a copy of this presentation. My original letter to President Biden and the team is there, as well as the blog.
Right.
Yeah, it's all on the website there, housed. And so, yes, and I chose not to go to Azerbaijan this past year for a variety of reasons. Funding was a huge one of them, but also there was like not a lot for civil society to do at that particular event. And I also, having gone to the Middle East twice to these conferences, I was like, I don't need to go back to that. And unfortunately, if you have been following it, it was a complete failure. Complete failure. Nothing got done. Everybody knew that they were waiting to this till countries actually produced their NDC. And we tried to get ours out in front of Biden because we knew that he had to release something because he lost the election. So unfortunately, what he pledged is nowhere near our fair share, but also had we had a different outcome in the election, I do believe that we would have been able to work with the Harris administration because my goal would have been to do what I refer to as a gap analysis of what the government was putting forth, and then saying, this is how much far away we are from what we actually have to do as a country. So where is the private sector going to come in and fill that gap? And where is civil society going to come in and fill that gap? And from my perspective, a gap filler, not just a gap filler, but a huge source of potential financial resource that could serve both to help us in the US, but also internationally, should come from the church. And there is a new campaign that is now being designed because the governments around the world are failing to do, yeah, it's a bad situation. We know that. So where is the private sector and where is civil society going to step in, and where is humanity going to step up and say, we actually understand the scope of the problem? And so the 3 targets of this new, it's called Taproot Earth campaign, and they just sent a huge delegation of young people of color that by the invitation of the Vatican. I feel like it's Pope Francis's sort of literal last gasp before he dies, to make sure, because I'm very worried about who will be the next pope. I think it will be someone who is very much in alignment with where the direction that governments are going. And the Vatican is its own country, so they have an NDC, and he wanted to hear from young people about what they wanted to see, and they were very honest with him. They didn't get to meet with him, but his team, because he's so ill. But they have named the church, the crown, and corporations as the who needs to pay up. And so there's a whole campaign around the crown, particularly around the issues and long-term impacts of colonialism and what the crown did. And they need to pay up. And then what the church needs to do, and then what corporations need to do. And we have all, in the theory of abundance, all the resources in the world to fix this problem. So how do we advocate around that and for that? And I want to do it in a positive way. I mean, churches, and back to this congregation, on your own, to be able to be a part of a presbytery, a part of a larger denomination, many and most of which who have made significant divestment pledges. Where is that reinvestment? Like, when you talk about money at the church, how do you talk about it? We know we have to raise money to keep our church going, literally and figuratively, right? But what does that look like at scale on a global level? So that's what we're hoping to do. And then almost done. So Baku, Azerbaijan was the COP29. It was a failure. And now we're on the road to COP30. And there really is great excitement that the US government is not going to be there, because regardless of who's been in power, we have not been paying our fair share, and we weren't going to. And so we need to think creatively and open the door to have some real conversations, and whether or not the United Nations is going to be able to continue to operate in the way that it has. So having this global meeting at this time in 2025, a quarter of a century into the 21st century, with all of these 80th anniversary of the United Nations, 10-year anniversary of Laudato Si, and listening to the indigenous wisdom of Brazil is going to be really exciting. And then I do have a prayer to close us out, but I want to have conversation, but I know we have no more time left. So
A few more minutes for discussion. We usually end at 8:15.
okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'll get more concise and better.
Yeah.
I'm part of Presbyterians for Earth Care, which is a voluntary part of the Presbyterian Church. But I think they have some conferences and some on their website that we can watch that are related to this. I haven't watched any, so I'll go back and look.
Sure. You definitely have delegation that comes from Presbyterians for Earth Care, but also the larger Presbyterian Church as a whole.
Who do you mean, what does the term mean? Civil society? There were the 3, right?
Right.
Governmental and corporate and then.
So
Public.
we know we mean government, but the pillar, if you think of everything's in 3s, right? Of course, Trinitarian, is the public sector is the governments. And then you have the private sector, which is the corporations. And then you have civil society. And one of the things that it's been interesting, the State Department, the US State Department, our negotiating team, they were telling us in international spaces that no one refers to themselves in the United States as a member of civil society, which is part of the messaging problem of getting all of this information out into community in the US. In the same way that if anyone in the room had been following one of the biggest asks that have happened from what is referred to as the G77, but it's 77 countries that needed to come together in a union, essentially, and make collective asks to the developed countries, because they're all so small and they don't have any power unless they're in a collective, that they have asked for the formation of a loss and damage finance facility. And that language of loss and damage is really at the top of what needs to happen around immediate climate finance, because so many, you think about the flooding that took place in Pakistan, for example, like there's been so much loss and so much damage that a country like that cannot possibly recover. And then you think about Pacific Island nations that they know they're going to be underwater. Some of them already are. We talk about climate migration, all of that. Who's going to pay for all of that? And so the loss and damage finance facility actually was negotiated. It was one of the primary negotiations that took place in Egypt. And the US was the worst actor in the negotiation the entire time, predominantly because at the time, Special Climate Envoy John Kerry was there, and he was telling his negotiators that we're willing to talk about the problem today, but we will not talk about historical responsibility. And the amount of money that was being asked because of our capacity to pay to put a major deposit into a loss and damage finance facility is so enormous. It's in the trillions of dollars. And granted, getting Congress to allocate that is impossible, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other entities in the US that could make that happen. But he just would not talk about anything. He said, we're not going to talk about how we got here. We'll talk about it from where we are today. And then he got COVID and had to get airlifted out on Air Force One. And we were able to jump in and get the negotiators to get out of their own way. And we said, stop blocking this finance facility from being established. The world is asking for this. The US can. So what if we don't put any money in it? Don't let it not get established. And we were able to get it established. So now they're trying to figure out where it's going to sit, whether it's going to be with the World Bank, which is not great. There's a lot of things there too.
So when you have these meetings, there are these three groups that are allowed to participate. Is that how it works? So governmental and industry.
You have a badge. It's a pretty, so it's 2 weeks long. The meetings are 2 weeks long. The dignitaries are all there during week one. The high level presidents and, the countries and things. And there's a lot of speeches that are made. That's not a great time to like try to get any work done. Usually it's like the people that nobody knows anybody's name are up 24 hours a day for the last 4 days of the conference trying to accomplish something. And so how you have access into the negotiating space, we're hopefully going to try to change. That's the big hope in Brazil, is that usually it's very closed door and you can't get in. So members of civil society are not unless you're invited by a government negotiation team, you can't get in that room.
Wow.
So it's all.
So you're like
industry? Or does it?
well, industry.
It's
So great question. So the last 5 COPs have had more representation from the fossil fuel industry than all the countries combined.
Wow.
And that, look at where they were holding the meetings.
Right.
So when we were in Dubai, which is a really strange place, I did go one day to Abu Dhabi with Dr. Ashley Ward, who's at the Heat innovation hub here, and we traveled just because we wanted to see it. We were all the way over there at Duke University, and we went, and we were not allowed to go to the president's. We thought we were going to get to see more, but unfortunately, Putin, they're not in the United Nations, and a bunch of other folks were actually at the UAE's presidential residence that we thought we were going to get to tour, and we couldn't because unfortunately these side meetings are happening all the time. And a lot of what's wrong and broken about the UNFCCC, the climate arm of the United Nations, is that it's been taken over by the fossil fuel industry. And so there's actually business deals that are getting made at these things. And another area, which I could do a whole nother presentation on, is this whole work around climate and militarism that is happening right now, and the way in which we know why, back to the What I Love campaign, why we fight these global wars is for resources, right? And so how that fits into who holds the power and what the investments are. And it's just going to be really fascinating to see in the US, because we're the largest producer of fossil fuels at this point. We're the largest exporter of liquid natural gas. And, it doesn't matter who's been in office. We've just been really a terrible actor internationally around a climate. And so, this current administration really wants to lock the rest of the world lock into the way in which we are in control of the fossil fuels on planet. So I want to be hopeful. So I will, no matter what, end on the hopeful, because I am so hopeful. I believe, and as people of faith, this is where, we need to have faith that something is bigger than we can possibly understand. I think what's going on right now is, as we talk about the Lenten season and what it means to be in the wilderness, and the challenges that we are up against is this is our time. This is our time. Humanity has been in a really interesting juxtaposition from day one, and something has got to give. And so I'm hopeful that it really is the young people of planet Earth that are coming together in these super creative ways, and are just not putting up with it. Whereas somebody, myself, 53 years old, I lived a good part of my life thinking that, especially in the body that I'm in, that the world was somehow working, and it's not, it just isn't. And so coming back to the eco-justice lens of our relationship with ecology and the economy, and I think progressive people of faith, and particularly people that have access to power. And so, again, people that look like almost everyone in this room, what our relationship to money is something that we need to consider. And one of the things that we're working on at the Council of Churches is helping create some pathway to doing essentially an autobiography of money, because so many people are uncomfortable. Money is a really hard thing. And we're seeing, the oligarchies, they're being very obvious about what they're up to. And so, I love to map things. I love to see things visually. And one of the things that I'm trying to do both personally and professionally is think about what mapping progressive affluence looks like. And just for fun, when I talk with, young people, and we were talking about where could we do something that would be really visible? And they're talking about concerts and the fact that the World Cup is going to be in North America in 2026, the largest watch sports, thing. And how could we do something around that? 16 locations, and just some really cool ideas. And then someone asked the point blank question: where is Taylor Swift's money?
Yeah.
Right? She's a billionaire. And how did Kamala Harris raise $1 billion in 3 weeks? Who are these people? So how do we, they're not me, they're not you. But I mean, Durham is growing really quickly, right? There's clearly some affluence here. And I got lost in Raleigh, which I do every time I go there. And I ended up in North Hills. And I looked at the developments there and I was like, I didn't even know that this was happening. And I live in Chapel Hill and that's transformed since I moved there in 2001. And I'm like, what do you people all think that we're doing right now? And what we need a movement to come back as a country and come back together. And Heather Cox Richardson, if you're familiar with her work, I mean, she's just such a truth teller in this moment. And she will be speaking, and I will send you the link, at the Old North Church in Boston on Good Friday, April 18th. We can't go.
She's in Raleigh, though. Some of us went to see her in Raleigh.
Oh, amazing, amazing.
No notes, but just answered everything.
Oh my gosh. Well, she will be delivering the keynote at the 250th anniversary of the lighting of the lantern of the Old North Church in Boston, which happens to be on Good Friday this year. And they didn't like pick that date and bring her in. That is the day that it happened, April 18th. 250 years ago. And so there's a campaign, and I would love to ask you and talk more about it. But if you're having a good Friday service, it has been asked for the Council of Churches, the main Council of Churches, the National Council of Churches. All of us are trying to throw together something really quickly because it's less than a month away, because we just learned about this. But a Let Freedom Ring, ringing of the bells, which happened the day after the lantern was lit. And I think that the fact that that's happening again during the Lenten season, and then you know, Christ has risen the next day, like we have to be that. That is what we are being called to do. And the faith community absolutely can step it up. And we're not sure what we're up against sometimes, but if we, I mean, that's what I love about the simplicity of Fair Shares is, you know, you can talk about it with children. And if you have more than your fair share, then how do you want to distribute it? And how can we be thinking about that from the local to the global? So that's like a whole nother, you know, aspect of it. Who in our communities deserves, for those of us that have access to resources, how do we redistribute it? And I love Reverend Malcolm. He's the founder of the People's Justice Council. He's one of the leaders of the national UCC environmental justice work. They do with Jim Antal and like wonderful people that are doing great faith-based work. And when he hits that home that, you know, climate finance is not charity, that, and I think that's a conversation that faith communities should be having about how we think about how we give and what are, you know, even to be designated as a charitable organization, what is charity? And is it actually just? And is it actually focused on equity? Or is it, you know, still trying to get the bodies out one by one from the river instead of walking up and trying to figure out where all these bodies are coming from?
Can I just ask a quick question? We had here for our youth group, Liz Becker, I think I wrote.
Oh, yeah, I love
The
Liz.
interfaith creation care of the triangle, and that's part of the whole, your whole. system,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. And
So-
then there's the Orange County Creation Care. So they've all been, is this congregation active in that?
Well, they
It's
came
our
and
youth
spoke
group.
to our
They
youth
came and
group.
spoke to our youth and talked about setting up dates where they could go out and do work on projects, sort of clean up
Fantastic.
things.
Mhm.
I don't know that, I'm not aware of any things that we've done since then that have been organized on a bigger scale. But some of the senior, you know, high school seniors in our group were very interested and most of what they focused on this year is really resources like collecting things, diaper bank, you know, food for food pantries and things.
Fantastic.
But yeah, they
They
were
went to, they
excited.
formed a group. They said it in one of the sermons. They formed it. Alex told me today and I didn't copy it.
Yeah, I saw that email.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they formed a group called like Westminster Youth in Action or
That's it.
something. like that.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah,
Oh my
It wasn't
gosh.
so much climate or environmental,
right.
that was the focus
this year, but it could be another year, you know,
Yes.
kind of the interest fed a lot on poverty, I
Yeah.
think, and.
Well, the sustainable development goals would be really interesting to like have that, you know, what do you touch on? And then are you familiar with the drawdown resource, the book Drawdown that came out? That yeah, if you, they have a whole entire website, but it really does show that every aspect of our lives, you know, we've kind of in some ways siloized ourselves as environmental, and just daily living is intersects with, you know, all of the different things. So everything has to be done, you know, that kind of everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah,
I didn't see that movie. It didn't look appealing to me, but I get the idea.
It seems like what you're talking about too, when you're talking about making these big efforts to address environmental concern. It's not just a money draw, it's not just like you're giving money to something. It's a whole part of commerce that generates work, kind of like when we talk about getting rid of all our hospitals and healthcare. That doesn't help the local community.
Right.
That makes them more burdened by not providing the care. And if we invest in that, then they get better care and they have more good jobs doing it. And similarly, I think with a lot of the climate goals, part of it is that we're not paying our fair share, but another side of that is it is an investment we can make that's not just making new colors of tablecloth.
That's right.
It's actually doing things for people that are needed, and it can be, you know, good for the local economy and the world economy.
That's exactly right. That's it. And that's why these boycotts have been like really powerful. I think, you know, whether or not we're going to see in the Dow or, you know, whatever it is, what the end result financially is, but it's been community building. And so the local businesses are thriving right now. And that story is really getting out. And, you know, there's just so much that we can do, and we're doing it for ourselves. I mean, you know, it's not like you're giving it away to make somebody else's life better. I mean, at this point, the known truth is that no one is exempt from this changing climate, and we really, you know, in all the tenets of our faith are there, and it's like it's just so exciting to wake up every day and know that like what you're working on is actually to be the best person you can be. And how we do that in community. And then, you know, asset mapping, there's a lot of discussion around asset mapping. That happens a lot in the resiliency area. What do you have? What do you need? How do we share? How do we, and so, you know, even if you wanted like a practical, you know, thing that you could do with the young people, I think would be really exciting is, you know, blow up a map of the location. You can do it on Google Map, you know, and the location of this facility. This is a place you all come together. Sounds like you're doing everything you can to make this a healthy, you know, positive place for the environment and for the people that come here. And then also what in a circumference of 5 miles around you is going on, because that's important. And if we could link up, you know, we have so many churches in, you know, just in the Triangle area, which is why I was thrilled, because, you know, as a state-based organization and quite frankly, getting to come to speak with you on this tonight was really special, because I'm doing less and less with individual congregations. This is just a massive project, but the Council of Churches works with, you know, churches in all these different ways. And so the ability to map, hopefully with the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation grant, we're going to actually be able to like put all of the Council of Churches on a visual map and start thinking about, you know, if you wanted to know where geographically all the Presbyterian churches are in Durham County, you could take the time to look up the addresses and all of those kinds of things, but collectively as a denomination, what is your impact in the place that you live? And some, you know, it's just fascinating. And then how do we do that with the overlap of per the Council of Churches of 19 denominations.
And there's a map of Earth congregations.
Yes, yes, exactly. And then being able to say, like, you know, as far as resiliency is concerned, the fact that you have a solar system and you're interested in battery backup, you could be, I mean, that's the definition of what a resiliency hub is, right? So congregations as resiliency hubs is an important thing. And too much happens within the four walls of a church often, and it doesn't actually open the doors into community. So
Well,
we,
that's a good way. Yes, I guess that part of the goal would be, you know, with our new fellowship hall and the kitchen that's there, if we have a longer term interruption of power, for instance, 4 days, something like that, inviting the community in more because we can continue to run our freezers and things like that
Mhm.
through the solar system. You can't do that now because when the grid goes down,
You go down too.
we go down.
Yeah.
Too. It's not safe unless you have.
We're working on pulling out the stories from Hurricane Helene, the churches that did have solar and how they were or were not able to provide what
Oh,
they had
interesting.
hoped to do with that. We have learned so much in Western North Carolina about the role that churches play and still are. So yeah, cooling centers are becoming a really big deal. You know, the mapping where commercial kitchens are in locations. It's just, and then next Thursday night, we're going to be having this whole conversation at Duke Divinity, and I'll send that link immediately when I get home tonight to the group, and it can go out. And we're really excited about it because we're bringing in, there's a gentleman from Louisiana that has launched a Project Lighthouse, and now has over 16 churches in Louisiana, where the churches are serving as congregational resiliency hubs for the community. And it's just incredible to learn how that's, you know, that's a revival of ministry of a unique sort. So, and who can do it. And it's scary to let people you don't know into your building, right? Like that's a real conversation, especially when we're talking about security issues left and right. And even with Heather Cox Richardson speaking at Old North Church, they're looking at security issues because that's a very visible thing. And Duke Divinity, for example, is no longer live streaming any of their, so it breaks my heart,
Oh,
but
really?
they just, you know, when they have guest preachers or student preachers, they're nervous about what someone might say
Oh.
and then having it out there. So people are controlling messaging right now, and we're having to get, and while we do that, let's just be really mindful about like who we're doing it for, which is again, you know, I mean, there's a lot going on. I don't have to tell you all, but.
Let's go back to the Durham can. These two here, we're all,
You know,
Durham can.
congregation.
What is it? Association. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
Great.
So
great.
you're doing listening sessions in the neighborhood. So I was thinking, wow, mapping for your listening sessions. That would be neat.
Yeah, that'd be really, really fun. So I know we're
I
over
guess we
time.
know.
I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I would like to just share with you because this is what gives me hope. So, well, of many, many, many things, but I shared this closing prayer as with our energy working group today as well. So the new COP30 presidency, somebody gets named as the president of the, y'all know all the acronyms now. I'm so excited. So the Federation Republic of Brazil, President Lula, anointed this person, Andre Arana Correa de Lago, as the COP30 president. And he sat down, he sounds amazing, and wrote a letter to the world. It's 10 pages, it's very long, and I'll love for you, I'm gonna send you the link because you'll see like what you still have questions for. And I can even put it in a Google Doc. So if you want to like comment or ask a question, I can like go through it because he goes into it. But the language that he used about the meaning of this moment is like wept. So I took 4 paragraphs out of his 10-page letter and put it into a prayer. So let us close in prayer. These are his words, okay? As we move towards the second quarter of the 21st century, the international community is bound to reflect on the shared human values that hold us together: peace and prosperity, hope and renewal, consideration and gratitude, unity and connection, resilience and optimism, generosity and kindness, diversity and inclusion. These values highlight our collective spirit in a century that will test our species' ability to adapt and innovate in building a common future. To our thinkers, spiritual leaders, artists, and philosophers, we call on you to help us transcend outdated mindsets whilst preserving shared values and innovating towards a new planetary renaissance. Humankind must regenerate its relationship with itself and with the nature it belongs to. Our human family will only be as resilient as our communities and neighborhoods are cohesive and strong. In enhancing the values of citizenship, we need to offer our children vision, exemplary models, and mentorship in demonstrating that the extent to which we respect each other and our environment is the extent to which we respect ourselves. Those who genuinely commit to winning the climate fight have the potential to emerge in leadership in a golden age of global renewal, regeneration, and cooperation. Let us move the world. Amen.
Wow, good ending. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, my allergies.
Thank you. I know. It's like rain will help with the fall. Thanks. Thank you so much for getting this all set up. Yeah. And I will put this all together and send it back, and then you can send it out to the team and
Okay, good.
yeah.
You already have get it, or maybe should we send it?
What? I just send it back to the people that I was emailing with.
Yeah, or to Sherry.
What's that?
She's gonna send us all the resources.
The link.
Usually we'll read it.